If you are over 40 years old and feel stuck at your level, this video will change your chess forever. I'm gonna share with you 5 principles that you can use in your next chess game and finally feel confident. All of the examples I'm gonna show you in this video are from real games of my students, adults, and a lot of seniors who really want to improve at chess, but they lack this clear decision-making process that actually brings results. This is the first position. Don't ask me how on earth did it happen. Black is not developing any pieces, which, by the way, I hope you never do. Always focus on your development in the opening. Nevertheless, they took the pawn on h3. Now we play as white, and the first thing is very good, bishop g6, the most active move, the only check, always focus on the most active opportunities, and that means that this king is stuck in the center, blocking the development, it's not going to be castled, so this is a huge achievement. Then we play king to g2, so far so good, get rid of this rook that is somehow annoying, creating problems. But then after rook h6, this position is so great for white, it's a huge advantage close to winning, but the next move, rook to h1, attacking the rook, unfortunately blunders the bishop. So the number one principle I want you to use in your games, think more about your opponent. I cannot overestimate how many games from my adult and senior students I have seen that were so great, but they lost because they stopped to think enough about their opponent's ideas. So whenever your opponent makes a move, what you have to do is stop for a second every single idea that you had. Every thought that you had about how to continue, you're so focused on yourself. Instead, just try to understand what was the idea behind your opponent's move. And the mistake, the crucial mistake that so many of you make at this point is like, well, but the rook was under attack, right? So he just went away. He wanted not to lose his rook. But this is the wrong way to think about it. It doesn't matter what was happening before, whether he was under attack or he just made that move. You have to think about the future. What is the intention that he has with this move? Does he create any checks, right? Does he want to give you a check next move? Is he threatening to capture something? Or he has created a threat of doing something really dangerous against you next move, like maybe creating a checkmate threat. In this case, it's very obvious, yet we blunder such stuff so often. My student was focused on his idea so much that he completely forgot to think what the opponent wants to do. And you have multiple ways to decrease the amount of blunders you make in chess. First is to be always focused on your opponent, what he wants to do, what kind of threats he created. But the second way, and if you combine both of them together, it's going to be so much more efficient, is to watch out for your vulnerable pieces, right? The pieces that are not protected, or the pieces that are equally attacked and defended. Like your opponent has 2 attackers, you have 2 defenders. For now it's fine, but it's a potential danger. If your opponent has 0 attackers, you have 0 defenders, it's an unprotected piece, so you also have to be careful with it. The more such pieces you have in your camp, the higher the chances that you're gonna blunder something. Just by nature, if the queen and rook are defending each other, it's so much more complicated to blunder it. Still possible, but this way, if you keep as many of your pieces protected as possible, you decrease the chance that you're gonna blunder something dramatically. Principle number 2. My student plays as white here. The position looks normal, but suddenly his opponent is playing b5. I would have never even thought about such a move. My pieces are not developed, I have vulnerable pieces. Why on earth would I create more weaknesses on my camp? But anyway, he plays that, and our task is to use that. The position is completely crushing, it's just winning, but only if you find the right continuation. My student played c5 and spoiled the entire thing. Now there is no advantage for white anymore. But how do you identify the right opportunity? Well, you start with the most active opportunities: checks, captures, threats, and active moves. If there is a really cool move in the position, then the chance is huge. That would be either a check or a capture or a threat. This is exactly why you have to start calculating your options, starting with those 3. And you do it not only for yourself, but also for your opponent. It's gonna help you decrease the amount of mistakes you make by a huge margin. Let's try this system here. There is no check possible. It's very easy for us. We can just skip this step. Then we have captures, and we have quite a few of them. We can take here, here, or here. We normally always start with the biggest thing that we can take, in this case the knight, but we have one attacker against one defender, not enough, we are going to lose our queen. Let's go on. That doesn't work. Then we can take all of those pawns. If I take here, well, he can just take with the pawn. Notice it's going to decrease the amount of vulnerable pieces he has, and that's going to basically solve his problems. He even is going to attack our queen. Now, if we take that pawn, it's not that bad, but he just takes back. Again, we are not achieving anything. You never want to make moves in chess that are not bringing you closer to your goal, which is creating as many problems for the opponent as possible. This capture, yes, it's opening up the C file, but we don't have anything to take there, and we make our opponent's rook much better. So both of the captures don't work. Checks capture threats, it doesn't mean that you have to immediately make that check if you see it. No, you have to start considering your options with it and think whether it can make sense to you or not. We come to the next step, which is creating threats. We also start with the biggest one. The biggest is always the king. Can we create a checkmate threat? Well, not possible. Next, the queen. It would be really great to attack the queen because it's defending the knight, but unfortunately, it's also not possible. Then the rooks. The rooks are protecting each other. They are not vulnerable. There is some tension with that bishop, so theoretically, if we are able to open up this diagonal, that would be really cool for us and really bad for this rook. But for now, it's not possible directly. He's gonna just take back, and he's very stable on the d5 square. And then comes the knight. Remember, the knight is a vulnerable piece, so actually we should always try to think of a way to put pressure on it. Can we attack it? Yes, we can. We can just play ace3. But of course, we never make a move immediately. We think, what can our opponent do? And there are almost no options for the knight to go. The only square it could go to is c6. But notice that it's unprotected on c6. Remember, we want to decrease the amount of vulnerable pieces in our camp, but of course we want to increase the number of vulnerable pieces in our opponent's camp. The more such pieces he has, the more difficult it's gonna be for him to handle all the pressure to deal with all of our threats. How can we continue the variation? Well, here again, we start with the most active opportunities. A lot of people make this mistake that, okay, they start with checks and captures, but then on the second move of the variation, they completely forget about it. No, every single step of the way, by the way, it applies both to you and to your opponent. You have to start from the beginning of the list. Checks, captures, and threats. And here, we do have still no checks, but we do have some lucrative captures, because this time we are not just taking the pawn. We also create a threat against that knight. The knight is vulnerable, right? So you try to think about the strengths of your position, like this queen is very active, the weaknesses of your opponent's position, like this knight is unprotected, and then you're trying to combine all of those into just one move, which is c takes d here, and the knight is in trouble. He cannot just take back this pawn. But again, this knight almost has 0 squares to go, and wherever it goes, it actually opens up this diagonal, and the rook is now vulnerable, so you can either play d6 or just take on e6. Anyway, win the exchange, win the pawn, the game is totally over. Instead, unfortunately, my student missed that opportunity, played c5, and now we haven't opened up the position. That's another strength of our position. We have the bishop against the knight. So generally, strategically speaking, we want to open up the position, whereas our opponent has knights, he wants to shut it down, but c5 is helping our opponent. Please, never ever help your opponent achieve his goal. Let's use this principle in action together. White to move, feel free to pause the video for a second and try to understand what should be the next move for white. This was the Collet secure third system, the opening that I recommend my students for white. Works wonders if you of course take advantage of it, because this position is much better for white. The question is, how to continue. My student played knight to e5, which somehow felt logical for him, but it makes it so easy for the opponent. And this is the mistake so many of my students make, especially seniors. They are not making it tough for the opponent. They simplify too much. Because if you do that, yes, you attack the queen, yes, you create a threat, but you ask yourself, how can my opponent deal with it? He can just take it, and then it's so much simpler for him. My student took on e5, now this is closed, this rook is not working, the attack is also over. The entire plan was actually to go ahead and attack the opponent, create threats. But now there are no threats, and he has time to stabilize, and he doesn't have any problems anymore. The right thing instead is to play knight to g5. Look how many threats it creates. First of all, checkmate in 1. That's the biggest threat we can ever create in chess. Yeah, of course, we always start with checks, but we only can blunder the queen here. That doesn't work. Then the captures, well, we can take here, but that blunders the rook, take here. None of the captures really work. And then we come to the threats. And this knight g5 creates so many threats. Here and here, basically, it's not possible to handle all of them, so our opponent has to take it. And you might say, well, here we allowed him to exchange, here we did that as well. First of all, he exchanges the bishop for a knight. Bishop is stronger, right? So that's already a concession from his side. Also, we didn't block our own rook here, and he still has this enormous weakness on e6. You don't want to make it simpler for the opponent. You want to create as much pressure on his position as possible. Now, we would be able to double the rooks along the e-file, create here threats. We can play g6, create here threats. We can remaneuver our rook over there, create those threats, and the usual move h6 wouldn't be possible because of our pawn on g5. We have so many opportunities, while it's tough for our opponent to figure out what to do. That's your main goal in chess, to make your opponent's life as miserable as possible. Principle number 3. Don't overcomplicate. If your position is great, like my student has here as white, don't make chess tougher than it is. He has an extra piece here if you carefully count the number of minor pieces, an extra knight. In such a situation, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to stabilize everything, make sure that your opponent doesn't have any dangerous threats, and then you want to exchange everything that moves until it doesn't move anymore. Because if you have 10 pieces against 9, you only have 10% more pieces. Yes, it's great, but it's not such a huge advantage. If you exchange a bunch and you have 2 against 1, you have twice as many pieces. As a result, it's much simpler for you to convert your advantage into a full point, into the victory, and it's much more complicated for your opponent to create some counterplay, right? The only thing he can do to somehow compensate that material disadvantage. My student takes here on e5, which is the correct thing to do, just exchange pieces. But after bishop takes, he plays bishop takes h7 with an idea to deliver the checkmate by sacrificing the bishop for a pawn. Why on earth would you do that? This is absolutely not needed. You already have a great position. You only sacrifice if you are sure that you're going to get something in return. Yes, if your position is miserable, you're about to lose, then you have nothing to lose. You can sacrifice everything. Maybe it's going to work out. Maybe you're going to give a checkmate. No questions about that. But if your position is already great, why would you take those unnecessary risks that the attack is going to fail, the sacrifice is not going to work out, and you're going to lose all of your advantage and potentially even more? All you need to do in this position, just keep exchanging. And then you're going to win more or less automatically. You decrease the attacking potential of your opponent. And this is the number one thing that you have to do in such a position. The number one goal you have. Like the best thing that can happen to you in this position is if you exchange the queens. Without the queens, it's not possible for your opponent to deliver the checkmate. As long as you keep your pieces protected, you develop all of your pieces, because who cares if you have an extra piece if you never use it, right? And you keep exchanging those stuff, you're going to just win. But if you do something like that, with bishop takes h7, chances are you are going to lose a huge amount of such games. Just take those unnecessary risks. It takes, in this situation it worked out for white because black played king to g8, trying to hide the king, but it's actually way too passive and allows white to play queen h5. But if he would have played king to g6, how do you continue? It's very complicated, to say the least. You don't want to make it more complicated than it has to be. Now you need to find some moves like, I don't know, queen d3, keep sacrificing your pieces just to get the checkmate somehow, and indeed it seems like it's super dangerous. But it's so complicated. You now need to sacrifice even more stuff and hope that all of your calculations are correct and you're going to deliver the checkmate in the end, which is not that obvious. If you're under 1500 ELO and find this video valuable, I have created something special for you. 2 dedicated complete trading programs for those under 1000 ELO and from 1000 to 1500 ELO. Absolutely everything you need to achieve that level in the fastest time possible. A simple and clear thinking system so that you can finally stop those annoying blunders. Practical exercises to make it stick to your mind so that you can actually use it in your own games. And of course, life lessons with me, where I'm gonna personally analyze your games and tell you exactly what you are doing wrong and how to fix it. Jason here, for example, went from 400 to over 1000 ELO in just a couple of months after joining the beginner program. If you are tired of those miserable losses, click the link in the description to join the program dedicated to your level, get 50% limited time discount, and finally bring your chess to the next level. So only sacrifice your material if you are sure that you're gonna get a clear reward afterwards. But after king to g8, the position was winning for white up to a certain point. First of all, he creates a lot of threats here, queen h7, queen f7, bishop e6, queen h7, that all makes sense, a lot of checks here. And then after rook to e1, white blunders everything. Why? Because he breaks the force principle, maybe the most important one in chess. If you're gonna use this one, your chess level will skyrocket. But please use it in every single one of your games, in every single one of your moves. Never ever make a move in chess without thinking about your opponent's potential response. This move, rook a to e1, follows my chess philosophy. You have to improve all of your pieces, you have to bring all of your pieces into the game, and if you can create a threat for the opponent at the same time, this is even better. I mean, that rook was not doing anything on a1, was not productive. Now it's coming to the game, it's on the same file with the opponent's king. Moreover, it's attacking this bishop that is even pinned because behind that the queen is hanging. What can be better than that? But the key here is it doesn't matter how great you think your move is, you never make it without thinking about the opponent's potential response. And how do you think about that? Well, hopefully you have guessed it correctly. Checks, captures, and threats. If you're missing something really cool from your opponent, then the chance is it's going to be either a check or a capture or a threat. There is only one check possible in this position. Bishop takes h2. This is not a big deal. Yes, our queen is hanging, but we don't have to take with the king. Thank God we can take back with the queen and then everything is great. Captures. What kind of captures does he have? And you normally always start with a threat that you're creating. Like, you don't expect him to just blunder the bishop. So you're looking for ways for the bishop to go somewhere. What is the most reasonable response for the bishop? Well, to take the knight. Not only you save the bishop, you also take something out of your opponent. Moreover, it's not just a capture, it's also a threat at the same time, as this queen is attacking that queen. So it's not like you have to choose out of checks, captures, and threats. If you can combine all of that at the same time, that would be even cooler. If you can give a check, capture something in the process, and create a few threats for the opponent, this is like the best move you can imagine. So don't just choose one. The best case scenario, combine as many of those as you can possibly do. And so now white is in big trouble. The knight is gone. We cannot capture the bishop back because the queen is hanging, and even the rook is hanging. And even though that move felt perfect, that's exactly what I am teaching, right? Bring all of your pieces into the game. That completely fails in this situation. That's why chess is a complicated game. And if you are thinking about the check, queen h4, let the king go somewhere and then take the bishop back, well, you have to start with the most active opportunities for the opponent. Not with the ones that you want him to make, but with the ones that are potentially the best for him, like keeping all of his pieces. He has two problems here, the check and the bishop is hanging. So he has to think, is there a way to solve both of the problems at the same time? And there is. He can just block the check with the bishop. And then you're in big trouble because you have a piece less. Instead, if you would have think about this here, or if you would have just thought, okay, what are my opponent's potential threats, you would have noticed that move and would do something about it. For example, knight to e4 is activating the knight. It's now not hanging, but the knight is at the same time really cool in this small center. It controls so many squares. What happened next in the game, though, is absolutely crazy. Instead of thinking about the most active moves and actually take that knight on c3, Black played rook to h8, which, yes, it makes sense. It's a threat attacking that queen, but it completely ignores what the opponent is doing. This is what I'm talking about. People are just focused on themselves, what they want to do. Yes, he wants to attack the queen goes away, then bishop h2, and that is potentially a checkmate or at least a perpetual check, so that is all cool. But he hasn't thought for a second, I bet, what can the opponent do? And what was the threat behind that move? Remember what we have started with. Whenever your opponent makes a move, stop everything. Yes, he wanted to play rook h8, but he has to stop it and think, what is the idea behind the opponent's move? And that was very simple, just to attack that bishop. Has 2 attackers and only 1 defender, so it's in trouble. Blunder alert! You have to do something about it. You cannot just ignore it and be strictly focused on your ideas. Moreover, when you start thinking about your ideas, you start with checks, captures, and threats. So yes, okay, the check doesn't work, but this is a capture, this is a threat, so you must start with this one. And only if this one doesn't work, then you even start considering that rook h8 option. So following this system, the opponent would have noticed that move and potentially would have won the game. Instead, after that, queen takes e5 was possible. My student played queen to g5 check first. It's again making it more complicated than it should be, because the opponent can play king to d6, and now this bishop is protected. And yes, the position is completely winning still, but again, like, you have to think about it. You cannot just take it. You have to calculate some lines like rook d1, whether you're gonna win afterwards, or knight d4 check. Yes, it feels cool, but now the king disappears and you cannot take the bishop anymore. You have to invent new ways to beat the opponent and so on. Whereas if you just take that bishop, that actually was your entire idea, to attack it, right? Then you're just winning. And I understand you might say, well, but queen g5 is a check and you told us to start with the check. Yes, but it doesn't mean you immediately make the move. It means you start considering your options with checks. But if after queen g5 you see that he plays king d6, and if you're not totally sure how directly you're winning here, and the alternative, then you can continue considering your options, and the alternative is just to pick up the bishop completely for free, then don't make it more complicated than it is. Just take it. But it went even crazier, because the opponent played bishop to f6, trying to block the check, and he didn't spend a second again thinking what is the potential response from the opponent. As a result, just blundered the queen. So please, never ever make a move in chess without thinking what your opponent can do. Let's try to use this principle here and find the best move for white. My student here had a fantastic position. It's nearly winning, but only if you do the right thing. He played knight takes e6, which blunders everything, right? Because the move feels cool, it creates a lot of discover checks, it attacks the rook, it's all great if you only focused on yourself. If you start thinking about the opponent, what he can do, then you're gonna notice, oh my god, he can just play d5. That is attacking the queen. This is like a threat, rook takes, knight takes f8, but it's only a rook. If he creates a counter threat of attacking the queen, then who cares about the rook? It's not relevant anymore. Moreover, this move breaks the connection between the queen and the knight, which means the knight is now a vulnerable piece, and there is no way to protect it. And the game is gone, everything is gone, all of the advantage we worked the entire game just disappears. White is in trouble here. In fact, the knight is lost, right? There is no way to save it. But black also didn't think about the most active way. He was thinking very strict, like, he played here, he attacks my rook, what can I do with the rook? Go here. That's the totally wrong way of thinking in chess. It doesn't matter how great your opponent's threat is. Even if he's threatening checkmate in one, you still start with the most active opportunities for yourself. Once you understand what is the threat, you ask yourself, what is my most active way to deal with my opponent's threat? If your piece is under attack, the most active way to deal with it is not to move your piece away, It's to create a counter threat for the opponent. Remember that the counter threat has to be at least as strong as your opponent's threat, or higher than that. He's attacking your rook, attack his queen. But that is super active. Of course, you always start with checks, but queen c6 is just blunder of the queen, doesn't work. Then continue with captures, there is nothing you can take. And then you continue with threats. Well, checkmate threat is not possible, but that is attacking the queen. So this is literally the first move that black has to consider here. He didn't, and after rook f7, well, white corrected his mistake and the position is winning again. Principle number 5. Never make your moves automatically. Here, my student plays as white against me. I'm actually playing here as black during our training session in the academy. And I'm playing a5. Up to here, he played all fine. But for some reason, he plays here a4 automatically. And that is a really bad positional mistake. And when I asked him, why would you play it? He just said that, well, you played a5 and I wanted to make sure it doesn't go forward, and so I played a4. But if you think about that, there is no threat of playing a4. I simply don't have any defenders, and that move also doesn't bring me anything. So by playing a4, you're wasting time. Time is the most important resource in chess, so never waste it for nothing. And you're creating unnecessary weaknesses in your camp. Like those dark squares, they're just holes. And I, as black, immediately went to use it. I played knight b8, knight a6, and knight b4. Yes, it takes time, but it's a very cool thing for me, because the knight on b4 would be extremely annoying for my opponent, and it would also be with the tempo, so he needs to spend one more move. And now, from a completely normal position, when my student could have played b3, bring more of his pieces out, by the way, also covers this a4 square if that's what you're worried about, but the bishop would be great there, bring your rooks to the center. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. But here, he has a lot of problems to solve, and suddenly this is worse. And he's thinking, okay, I have to go forward, I have to create some problems for the opponent. So he played bishop g5, which I didn't understand, because I can just play h6, which is a useful move for me anyway, and now his bishop is under attack. If you want to go backwards, again, you're wasting time, this is never a thing, but instead he takes. And I'm like super happy about it, because now I have a pair of bishops. Remember, never exchange your bishop for a knight without a very good reason to do that. And he's coming up with a plan to play f4. But this is strategically the wrong thing to do. Why? Because I have a pair of bishops. So for me, it's great to open up the position. And if my opponent is doing that for me, well, thank you very much. But that's not what you should do. And here is exactly what happened. King h1, I went ahead with my plan. By the way, you have to be consistent in chess. If I played knight b8 with an idea to go here, please don't forget about it. Go ahead with your plan. It's better to have a bad plan than to not have any plan at all. And after knight a2, trying to stop my idea, well, the problem with such an approach is it's very passive, it's reacting. It's not doing something active for yourself, it's just passively trying to stop your opponent's ideas. Remember, yes, we have to be careful with our opponent's ideas, but we have to ask ourselves what is the most active way to deal with it, not how can we passively defend. Because now this knight is really horrible here, whereas this knight can potentially go to c5, where it's also going to be very strong. And I played g5, which I find pretty instructive here. It's not the best move according to the computer, but I knew that my opponent's idea is to play f4. And this is his entire plan and the only active thing he can do. Now, if I completely shut it down like that, he's lost. And that's exactly what happened. When you stop your opponent's idea, at the same time you're active, you're improving your position, your opponent collapses, even if he's very strong. My opponent is over 2150 in this game. Yet he's playing h3, immediately blundering the pawn. Bishop takes h3. Remember, that's the principle. Never make your move without thinking what the opponent can do. And whenever you touch any of your pieces, just ask yourself, can it be taken? The simplest thing that you can do, but it's gonna save you from so many blunders. And indeed here, after bishop h3, he's in big trouble, he cannot take it, because this is hanging, and if he doesn't take it, it's even worse. So here you have it, 5 principles that will change your chess forever if you use it the right way. But how to combine all of that and play a really cool game of chess? In this video, I show you how I use these exact principles to crush my opponent in a real tournament game with 99.6% accuracy.